What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Saturdays in STORRS podcast brought to you right here on the Crossover channel. My name is Kanaye, and a lot of news coming out this week in the world of UConn basketball, just between guys announcing that they're going to be hitting the portal, guys making their announcements that they're going to be running back for another year in STORRS, and of course, I think the biggest news of it all is UConn landing Silas Demary Jr. from Georgia in the portal yesterday. On the date of this recording, Friday, April 4th, they were able to land Silas yesterday on Thursday, and huge announcement, huge pickup for this program. But yeah, I'm going to break down a lot of that in this episode today. But before we get into that, if you like this podcast, if you like any of the other content you see on this channel, please engage with it in any way you can. Like the video, subscribe, tell other people about our videos. It really does help with getting this content out to more people. So let's not waste any more time and get right into it. I think a good place to start, just to talk a little bit about the four guys who have hit the portal from UConn this past year. Those being Nowell, Isaiah Abraham, Yusuf Singare, and Aiden Mahaney. Now, I know headlines were made by Hurley when he went on 60 Minutes and said that 50% of his roster was either considering hitting the portal or already knew where they were going to end up going into next year. Now, if you don't factor in guys who graduated like Hassan and Samson, or the guys who are more than likely going to the NBA, like Liam McNeely, more than likely Alex Karaban, then that leaves you with 8 remaining players, and 4 of the remaining 8 have hit the portal, at least so far. So, yeah, what Hurley said, it seems to be true. And I think when he did say that, those 4 guys were probably the names most mentioned in terms of people who, in terms of players who most people thought were probably thinking about hitting the portal, just considering, Nowell was a top 30 recruit. Didn't really get a lot of playing time this year, kind of struggled in the minutes where when he did play. But yeah, you don't know. He probably wasn't going to be in a starting role going into next year, and he wants to play. And it's hard to fault a kid for looking for a school where he is going to be able to play more minutes and probably make a bigger bag NIL-wise. Same deal with Isaiah Abraham. Not as highly sought after as a recruit coming out of high school, but still nonetheless a player with a lot of raw talent and potential, really athletic. I know the coaching staff talking about how he was a lot more offensively talented than what they originally thought they were getting. So, I think that's definitely going to help Isaiah Abraham's case for teams going after him in the portal. And I definitely think he's going to end up having a decent role at some point in his basketball career in college. Yusuf Singare, another one that's, of course, it kind of came down to what he really wanted. If he was fine with continuing to be probably a third string big in this UConn program, then yeah, stay. But he probably wants to start playing. He hasn't played really at all the last 2 seasons, and he could probably be a quality starting 5 in the conferences like the MAC or maybe the A10, somewhere at the mid-major level. And I think he is going to excel in that type of a role. So, I wish him the best as well. And then Aiden Mahaney, he obviously was supposed to be one of the stars this year, and it just wasn't the right fit in terms of his play style, his physical makeup. And I just think it's tough to go from the West Coast Conference to the WCC. But even going back to the WCC, or my mistake, going from the WCC to the Big East, but even going back to the West Coast Conference, he wasn't the greatest defender there neither. He wasn't efficient there at all as well. And I think you take a look at the player development that this program has done with transfers and program guys alike. They've grown year to year, and you were kind of expecting Aiden Mahaney to get to the point where he does kind of fully understand what he needs to do, what he means to be the next great UConn guard, and it just didn't work out, and it's unfortunate. I definitely feel for Aiden a lot, just considering that in a way, he came in to be a starter, to be one of the big names at UConn this past season. He fell out of the starting lineup, kind of got buried on the bench at points of the year, had a little bit of a stronger showing towards the end of the season, but in a way, kind of definitely didn't kind of lost the year of college basketball. I really do hope this goes for all 4 of the guys. I hope they find the right fit, play for a good coach, and I hope they have a good finish to the rest of their collegiate careers because they're all good people, and they did play for this UConn program. So I'm always going to wish anyone who ever put on the UConn jersey, good luck going forward. So yeah, again, good luck to those guys. Thank them for everything they've done for UConn basketball, even though maybe it wasn't as successful a season as everyone would have liked. But yeah, I mean, I think moving on from that, it's definitely a big talking point about Jaylin Stewart and Solo Ball announcing that they are both going to be returning to UConn next season. Really, really important that those guys come back. I know I talked about it a lot, how I felt that the staff really needed to prioritize retaining Solo, Stewart, and Tarris Reed. Tarris Reed, I'm going to talk about in a little bit, but Solo Ball and Jaylin Stewart announcing their return. They're going to run it back for another year in STORRS. Super pumped about those announcements. Again, you really need those guys to come back. Solo Ball, of course, being the leading scorer essentially coming back because since Liam's going in the draft. And of course, you saw the jump that Solo had from his freshman sophomore year. And what he's done, essentially solidified himself as one of, if not the best returning shooter in the country going into next year. But yeah, again, that's a guy who I've talked about a lot, needs to improve in certain ways, like his defense, like doing a little bit more off the dribble and creating his own shot, getting to the mid range, going to the basket aggressively. But yeah, that was a guy who you needed to get back, and they did. And there were rumors that he was being offered in the realm of 1 to 1.5 million to hit the portal. I know I've heard schools like Kentucky um, were kind of in a way one of those schools that might have thrown that offer up in the air towards him. And you just have to give Solo a lot of respect for turning that down because if I'm being honest, I don't think UConn is paying him what he probably could be getting at other schools. I think a lot of people expect UConn's NIL funding to be a lot higher than what it actually is. And yeah, I just don't think UConn is going. I don't know if they can win in a bidding war against the likes of schools like Kentucky, Duke, um, my mistake, UNC and Indiana. But to have guys like Solo and Stewart who are loyal and sticking with the program, in a way taking a quote unquote pay cut to stay here and try to compete with Hurley, get back to a Final Four, try to win another national championship. I mean, all the respect of the world just goes to guys like that. I really hope Tarris follows suit and does the same. But yeah, really important getting Solo back. He's a guy that can really take the next leap and kind of further follow along that Jordan Hawkins growth um, type of trajectory that I think a lot of fans and the coaching staff have had for Solo, essentially since he stepped on campus, really. He's already kind of taken the first step of being a starter, being a leader. He's going to have to be he's going to be an even bigger leadership position going to next year, which I'm really excited to see how he handles that. But yeah, if he continues to grow and improve, then he could be a really good player. I mean, I'm talking first team all league in the Big East, potential Big East player of the year, potential All American maybe. So I'm really, really excited to see year 3 Solo and STORRS next season. And again, really, really good. Get him back. Same thing goes for Stewart. I've talked about a lot how much I like Jaylin Stewart and how I think he's shown so many flashes across the 2 first years of his career here. Of course, you think back to 2 seasons ago when he nailed those 3 threes against Marquette in the Big East Tournament Championship game. This year, the 16 first half points against Memphis, the game against Villanova where he defended Eric Dixon really well and also had a great showing offensively against Marquette on the road where he had the hot start where he made 3 straight threes to start the game. Against St. John's, hot start again there in that game. And yeah, just some other big games like, speckled here and there with big moments. Like the putback dunk against Marquette at Gamble. He made a lot of glue guy plays, diving on the floor for loose balls, getting blocks, getting steals, playing good defense. And that's a guy who I really, really think you needed to get back to just because I think he's going to go into this offseason super motivated and hungry. He hasn't, played a lot. I think he was deserving of more minutes than what he got this past season. But again, he's a guy who hasn't played an incredible amount of minutes. And next year, I think he's probably going to be in a starting role. And I think he has a really great all-around offensive game. If he can become better defensively, on top of the growth we've already seen from him this year, I think he could be a really, really good player. Potential all-league ceiling, I think, in the Big East. So really good getting Jaylin Stewart back. Super excited to see Stewie in year 3 as well, along with Solo. So just to talk about Tarris Reed a little bit, I've heard the consensus early in the process was that Tarris Reed was going to hit the transfer portal. Now, it seems that conversation has kind of turned on itself, and it seems more and more like he is going to be coming back. I know um, at one point Mark Zanetto, who was doing the Locked On UConn podcast, now does the Big East Energy podcast. He did mention that he knew a source that was saying that Tarris Reed was more than likely going to enter the transfer portal, and that Solo Ball was going to test NBA waters. Now, obviously, the Solo thing did end up being true, and the Tarris thing, I mean, it's kind of dragged out long enough. You think he could potentially be holding out just to enter the portal a little bit later on, so that schools, once guys start committing places, they know where they're going. Schools kind of start running out of options in terms of guys to go after. If Tarris Reed were to hit the portal today, for say, then he would arguably be the best transfer in the portal right now, and he could make upwards of $2 million in NIL money. And I think that is kind of what Tarris is getting back in terms of the feedback of what he is worth if he were to hit the portal. And again, it would kind of be like the same situation with Solo Ball. If the rumors are true that Solo was offered around the realm of 1.5 million, then you have to give Solo so much credit for being loyal and turning that down, where he's probably not making nearly as much at UConn right now. The same thing with Tarris Reed. If he's hearing that he can make upwards of seven figures, then I think UConn probably, he could potentially use that for leverage to get a little bit more money out of UConn, which, I mean, it's hard to fault the kid for doing that when you're hearing that you can make this much money somewhere else. I do think he wants to stay with UConn, but it is tough to turn down that type of money, which, again, is understandable. You want to capitalize on the profit you can make in your collegiate career as much as you can, considering that not everyone is going to be a pro. I think Tarris Reed is good enough to be a pro. And if he comes back to UConn, I think I've talked about so much on this podcast, where I think he's on a similar path line to what Adama Sanogo was 2 years back, where he could come back as a senior and be a potential Big East player of the year. I mean, I would probably say Zuby Ejiofor comes in as a preseason favorite in the Big East next year. But I mean, Tarris Reed, I think, is like right there with him. He's a guy who I think can average like 17 and 9, maybe 8, 16 and 8 off. As a starter, he had the best year of his career coming off the bench. So just imagine what he can do as a starter next season. But yeah, it's going to come down to what Tarris Reed values most in terms of, I guess, if he wants to go after the money. Again, it's hard to fault someone for doing that when you're able to make that much money in college. But yeah, again, I think it's really, really important you try to get him back. And UConn, I think, if Tarris comes back and says, hey, I'm hearing that I can make this X amount of money if I were to hit the portal, do you think you could come up a little bit closer to the number and try to match that? And honestly, if I'm UConn, I think if you have to overpay a little bit for Tarris, you do it, because that's a guy who needs to get back. He's been in the system for 1 year, can come back. I mean, he's already had some big performances and showcased a lot of the raw talent he has. And I think he's already improved so much mentally throughout the course of this past year. And I'm sure he will even more over the summer. Continue to develop his footwork, make right reads, make better decisions with the ball. And again, he's a guy who's going to be could be dominant on the glass next year, dominant post presence. You hope if he comes back, he could be somewhat similar to Adama, where you throw it in the post to him, it's almost a guaranteed layup, a guaranteed 2 points, or he's going to get fouled and go to the line. So again, I think you do whatever you can to get Tarris Reed back, as long as it is reasonable. And but yeah, I mean, that's a guy you need to get back for sure, because if he doesn't come back, then UConn is kind of in a scramble situation where they probably need to go and find a starting caliber big, because I just don't know that Eric Riba will be ready to go right off the bat to start the season. But yeah, I'll touch on those that freshman class in a little bit. But let's get into the biggest news. Like I mentioned at the start of the podcast, Silas Demary Jr., combo guard from Georgia, hit the portal, was rated as the top 7 transfer in the cycle. And I believe, I want to say top 5 combo guard, point guard. I forget what 24/7 Sports had him listed as. I want to say combo guard. But yeah, huge get for UConn. I know Silas was talking to several schools like St. John's, like Kentucky. I know Mark Pope had the in-home visit with him where, he asked on a Zoom call, what are you doing for dinner tonight? And a few hours later, he shows up at Silas's front door. Um, I know St. John's made a big running after him. St. John's has a lot of money in NIL, and I'm sure Silas had to turn down a pretty large number from St. John's. And he does fit the archetype of being a Rick Pitino guard. They definitely have a lot to replace. Of course, they're losing Davon Smith, Kadari Richmond, RJ Lewis as well. That would have been someone who they went after heavy. I do believe Silas did have a Zoom meeting with Duke, but obviously they're in the Final Four, so I think that's why he probably couldn't go on a proper visit. But yeah, he visited UConn on Tuesday, and he must have had a good enough visit to ultimately decide that he wanted to commit 2 days later. So really, really important get for this UConn team. I think he's the perfect fit for UConn just in terms of his physical makeup. He's a Dan Hurley guard, which he likes, a bigger guard, 6'5". I think he's around 195, 200 pounds. He's not someone who's going to get pushed around the way that some of the guards this year might have, just considering, they were a little bit shorter, they're a little bit smaller. And it's tough to have smaller guards in the Big East and such a physical conference. And I talked about it all year, how UConn's smaller guards this year, they've had to run their sets out from so far behind the three-point line, where last year with Tristan Newton, again, slight frame, but he's 6'5", played physical. He's backing you down to right behind the three-point line where UConn wants to get to be able to run their sets and schemes in action. So I think Silas, it reminds me a lot of Newton in a lot of ways, and just some of the shot making where he has no fear of taking a lot of the contested deep three-point shots. He's pretty good at getting downhill, going to the rim and finishing. He's a solid finisher. He gets to the free throw line, which is really important. This was a UConn team this year that wasn't great at drawing fouls, and that's something that Silas is going to be able to do a lot of, I think. Of course, he's going to bring a lot of shot creation, which this UConn team lacked this year. He's pretty solid at being able to, like I mentioned, getting to the rim, getting to the basket, going to the lane. He can get into the mid-range a little bit, though it's not one of his strong suits. But again, he can step out, hit the three. You look at his stats, it doesn't say that he is the greatest three-point shooter, but I think it is important to note that in his final 10 games of the season, he was averaging around 19 points per game as opposed to his average from the whole year, which was around 13. And on top of that 19 per game in his last 10 games at Georgia, he was also knocking down around three threes per game. So that's really important, I think, to consider in terms of how he grew as Georgia season went on. And I do think he is a lot more proven than some of the other transfers that we've gotten over the past, year. Of course, Mahaney coming over from the WCC, you're always taking a shot in the dark on a mid-major guy. You really don't know how they're going to play at the high major level until you see them play. Tarris Reed, I don't know, was as proven as perhaps Silas has kind of proven himself over this past year. I know Rob Dosser talked about it a lot on his Top Dogs podcast. But of course, you have to consider Silas was playing in the SEC this year, which was the best conference in the country in college basketball. He helped a Georgia team pick up several ranked wins. I want to say 3 or maybe 5 on the year. And he also led them to the helped to lead them to the NCAA tournament with Austin Nowell. And this is a guy who didn't watch too much tape on throughout the year. But, I've talked to a lot of people who said, they tune into Georgia games just because they're on, because they get to see Austin Nowell. And then they see their lead guard, Silas Demary Jr., play really well as well. So that was someone I know a lot of people talked about. And UConn was definitely in the running for him early in the portal process. So I am really glad that we were able to land him. But I know I listened to Silas's introductory press conference last night. Last night I listened to it, and he said a lot. One of the drawing points which led him to committing to UConn was about how the staff on Silas's visit, the staff showed him a lot of Tristan Newton's highlights, a lot of his tape from when he played here at UConn, a lot of the actions and stuff they ran for T-New. And they kind of sold him on the idea of him kind of being the next Tristan Newton. And again, I talked about how they're similar in physical makeup, 6'5", they play physical. And yeah, the way they move kind of I mean, they move. They both look like really. Again, Tino was really calm on the court. Silas has a very calming presence as well in terms of what I saw out of his Georgia tape. They're pretty solid ball handlers. Nothing that blows you away, but definitely someone who you're comfortable to have handling the ball, bringing the ball up the court, and of course executing your offense. And I think that's a great path line to have him on in terms of, like I mentioned, having solo ball in the Jordan Hawkins growth trajectory, Tarris Reed with the Dama Sanogo, Silas Demary Jr. with becoming the next Tristan Newton. And I think that's a great plan to have. And yeah, I think this is a guy who is going to maybe struggle a little bit. UConn, point guards tend to struggle a little bit under Dan Hurley in the first year. I think just because of how complex and how much there is and that you need to learn both offensively and defensively. But I do think it's important, again, to consider how much he's grown from the start of his sophomore season at Georgia to the end of it. And I think he could only continue to get better. And he's a player who could end up being an all-league guy this year. And if he comes back for a senior year in STORRS, then I think he could definitely be on all Big East watch. But again, I think it's the job of the staff to identify guys who fit their culture. And I think it was important. They wanted to go after a guy that they were going to be able to get 2 years out of. Of course, Silas is going to be a rising junior, so at most he'll be able to play 2 seasons in STORRS. But yeah, there were other guys in the portal who were options, but maybe they only had 1 year left of eligibility, and you want guys that you can continue to build your program with. And you have that core Solo, Stewart, and potentially Jay Ross, who I kind of forgot to talk about. But yeah, those guys are all going to be rising juniors as well. You add in Silas, who is in that class, and you have those guys for going into next year, and potentially if some of those guys are running back for the senior year, then you kind of have a great 2-year window open here where you can make some noise, try to get back to a Final Four, and win another national championship. But yeah, Silas, really talented offensive player. I think he needs to become a little bit better of a playmaker. I think being in UConn's offense is going to help, which is, of course, all the actions they run, how complex their sets are. It's going to provide the opportunity for him to get guys good looks. I think Newton was a little bit better passer coming into UConn than Silas is, but of course, Newton was a year older, and I'm sure Silas can definitely get to that point. He is a really solid defender. Of course, I mentioned large frame, big guard. If he can be a lockdown defender, which his team lacked a lot of last year outside of Hassan, that's going to be really important. And again, the team's got to become a lot better defensively. They need to grow in that field of the game a lot more going to next year. But yeah, I mean, I just, outside of Silas, I don't think UConn is done in the portal yet. I know a lot of it is dependent on if Karaban decides to come back or not. But this is something where I think he's going to kind of take it down to the wire, similar to what he did last year, where he probably waits to make his decision until he's fully gotten through the draft process, gone to the combine and everything of that sort. If I was a betting man, I would probably say Karaban stays in the draft right now. I just don't think he necessarily benefits all too much from coming back another year in college, for another year in college, I mean. And I just think there's just really not much more that he could have done at UConn or in school. He is going to graduate with a diploma this year, being that he's a redshirt junior and was going to school here a year before he actually started playing. On top of that, he's a 2-time national champ, started for 3 years, was an all Big East player this past year. And yeah, I mean, he's a guy who deserves to be in the Huskies of Honor. If he comes back, I'll by all means accept him. I'll welcome it, of course, just because how good he could be when he's not going to be probably the number one guy next year. He'll have a lot of other guys to fall back on. He won't be as high up in the scatter report next year as the way he was this year. But yeah, I would definitely think that he probably stays in the draft this time around. I think he's a pro. A lot of people say he's not an NBA player. I think he is. You need to remember, he's never going to be a star, but he's a guy who's going to be able to come off the bench, contribute, knock down open threes with how much spacing there is in the NBA, and be a solid role player. He'll probably have a long career. I deep down really do think that. But yeah, I mean, of course, I would assume he probably doesn't come back this time around, which would kind of leave the door open for UConn to have to go after a 4-man kind of a wing 3, 4 who can do a lot of the same things AK did in terms of being able to space the floor, attack the rim at times, be a little bit of a playmaker as well, pass in terms of facilitating, and just a few guys who kind of come to mind. I know UConn is in the running for Amari Monroe. He played at Quinnipiac this past year, averaged around 18 points per game, was the MAC Player of the Year. He's a guy who's really athletic, um, really big frame. He's well built. It should have no problem adjusting to the physicality of the Big East. And that's a guy who I think you don't have to worry too much about the adjustment, just considering that he's not really a lead guard. He was on ball a lot at Quinnipiac. I doubt that'll be the case as much at UConn, but he does kind of provide the playmaking abilities that in Andre Jackson or Steph Castle provided if he does end up committing here. Like I just mentioned, he's really athletic, can get up and down in transition, throw down some big dunks, and he's a guy who would be really fun to watch if he does end up committing here. That is a guy who I really do think you prioritize right now. I know he just listed his top 6, and UConn is in the with the likes of Kansas, Rutgers, Miami, Pittsburgh, and I forget the last school, but yeah, that's definitely a guy who I think would play really well here. And of course, he was at Quinnipiac. It would be nice to keep him in state, have him come over to STORRS and play his senior year here. I know another guy that's been talked about particularly a lot by Mark Zanetto is Mackenzie Mbako from Indiana. He's a guy who UConn offered when he was coming out of high school, and so the staff already has an established relationship with him. He's a guy who he's burly, he's got a big build, plays a little bit more back to the basket in comparison to Amari Monroe, but he's a guy who can step out, hit shots, definitely do a little bit of playmaking out of the post. And he played in the Big Ten, physical conference, already proven at the high major level. I'm definitely higher on him than I was on Malik Renew, who just committed Miami a few days ago. And I think either of those guys would be a really good get. I forgot to mention about Monroe. Not great shooting numbers from 3, but I've talked to people and they've said that a lot of that is attributed to him just being on the ball so much at Quinnipiac, being that they're their kind of go-to guy. But yeah, I think either of those guys would be a good get if Karaban does not end up coming back. And outside of that, I think you probably need to recruit one more guard to come off the bench, just considering you're losing Ahmad and Aiden in the portal. You really don't have anyone to play that backup lead guard role right now because when Silas or Solo goes to the bench, you don't really have any other guards that I think are ready to kind of step up and play in that lead guard role. So I think it's tough because you need to recruit a guy who's willing to accept the role and come off the bench, which is really hard to do in this day and age of college basketball in the portal. Everyone wants to make money, as much money as they can. Everyone wants to be in a big role, probably be a starter. But I think one guy who kind of comes to mind is Malachi Smith. I do believe we have contacted him. I do believe the staff has contacted him. He played at Dayton this past year. Pretty solid passer. I think he averaged around 6 assists per game. Played really well against high major competition whenever Dayton had a big game against a high major school. And, decent scorer, but definitely on the smaller side, kind of like 6'1", I believe, 6'2" at most. Very similar to Diarra. He is a New York City guard, Malachi Smith. And, if he's willing to accept a bench role where he's coming off the bench, running the point when Silas Demary and Solo are not on the floor, then I think that would be a great get. That'd be a good guy to have. I think he fits the toughness and defensive mentality that this staff tends to have or want to have with their players. And then on top of that, I think with the loss of Yusuf Singare, you probably need to bring in one more backup big. Again, it's tough because I really don't know how much that guy would play. I don't know any names that come to mind right now, but you need to consider you have Tarris Reed. If Tarris Reed comes back, he's most definitely going to be the starter. You have Eric Riba, who could be coming off the bench, kind of in a clinging role from 2 years back. But maybe you bring one guy in and kind of challenge Riba a little bit, give him a run for that backup center role, give him a run for those minutes. On top of that, I did watch McDonald's All-American game a few nights back. Not a great showing from those 3 guys, Mullins, Adams, and Riba. But, I'm sure that game's tough to really critique too much because it's just a bunch of high school kids who want the ball and want to show out to the world. So, I'm sure those guys will be ready, at least mentally, once they get to STORRS. Obviously, they're a lot of their high school seasons have come to an end or are coming to an end, depending on if they're playing in nationals or not. But yeah, I'm excited to see those three guys in STORRS next season. But I think that's pretty much going to take care of everything I have for this episode today. Again, really important getting Solo and Stewart back. Really praying that Tarris decides to do the same. And huge transfer landing and getting Silas Demary Jr. Super excited to see him in the blue and white next year, rocking a UConn jersey in STORRS. But yeah, until the next episode, I will see you all next time.